I'm Judy Shaw for NYSE Floor Talk. Joining me today is Debbie Dial. Debbie is the Senior Vice President and Controller at AT&T. Debbie, it is so great to have you on the show, and congratulations on your nomination to join the Board of Directors at Dow.
Great. Thank you, Judy. It's great to be here. I appreciate y'all inviting me.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for joining us again. Okay, so you initially connected with Dow through the NYSE Board Advisory Council. Can you tell us about your experience with the council as a candidate?
I think the first thing that I would say is that the way the New York Stock Exchange Council identifies and includes diverse candidates in the program provides a lot of instant credibility to the process and to the council. I mean, generally, each of these board candidates have all been recommended or nominated by their respective CEO as someone who is board ready. Being recommended by your CEO speaks volumes to another CEO looking at board candidates to come up with a slate. Your CEO certainly understands the experience that is needed to successfully be a board director, and arguably wouldn't be recommending anyone that he or she didn't feel had that experience. So I can't underestimate the importance that this is. And then the second thing that I would say is the networking is tremendous. This was my first year being part of the council, so I don't have a point of reference really to compare what networking looks like in a non-virtual world. But even in a pandemic year where discussions and conversations were only able to be held virtually, the networking was top notch. The New York Stock Exchange team held a networking event that I liken to speed dating. They matched candidates with representatives from various New York Stock Exchange companies, think CEOs to nominating and governance committee board chairs and members. So each company had a virtual room, and potential candidates were able to move from one company's room to another room every 10 minutes. And then the third thing that I would say, Judy, is this team at the New York Stock Exchange that runs the advisory council defines the words support and supportive. They take it to a new level. I mean, when they say we're here for you, they mean it. No request is too big or small for this group. And it's more than putting on networking events. It's creating and making connections between the candidates and the New York Stock Exchange companies, both on a formal and an informal basis.
Okay, so Debbie, in your experience, how important is your professional network for pursuing a board seat or furthering your career in general?
I think it's really important, Judy. I mean, networking is really important, and yet more and more today, companies need to think about leadership, board membership in terms of not only who we know, but who we need. And this is why programs like the New York Stock Exchange Board Advisory Council are so critical to helping expand networks, not just for individual executives like myself, but as well as companies who are looking to recruit new board members. I don't know the exact percentage of board seats that are filled by word of mouth versus an executive search firm, but I do know it's substantial. And so one of the best pieces of advice I got when I started thinking about my desire to get on a board was to meet with as many people as I knew that were on boards. So I set these up through virtual coffee meetups, and some of the people I knew well, and some were just acquaintances, but everyone was more than willing to have a short conversation. And then when I had these discussions, a common theme from those I talked to was now that they knew that they were aware of my interests, they would keep me in mind as they hear of companies looking for candidates. And that's happened. Folks in my network have reached out with these opportunities. So in these virtual coffee sessions, it ended up with mutual benefits, not just education on how the process works, but also on opening doors. So I would say it's not just having the network, it's also letting the network know of your interests.
Okay, so now what advice would you give to other leaders who are looking for board experience?
I think first and foremost, most important is to talk to as many people as you know who sit on boards. Ask how their journey happened. And then secondly, I would say, if you haven't spent time in a boardroom, I'd find a way to do this. I think exposure to boards is important to understand what goes on in a boardroom. And very importantly, the difference between management and oversight or governance. Board members provide oversight and governance, though they don't manage the business. And then I think the third thing that I would say is understand and think about what kind of company you may be looking for. I got some advice very early on to perhaps think about it from a different vantage point. I think most people think about industry specific. And so the advice I got was maybe not think about it just that way. Think about what a company is going through from a governance perspective and your ability to add value with what that company is going through.
Debbie, can you shed some light on what the nomination process entails once you make that initial connection?
I mean, the first thing that I would say is I think this can vary quite a bit across companies and can vary depending on the company's need. For example, does a company have an immediate need, or are they just continuing to keep an active list of potential candidates from when an opening might come up? I mean, for me with Dow, after the initial connection, I had a couple of subsequent meetings with the CEO and then a couple of individual meetings with a few of the board members, all virtually. And I think, in a non-pandemic world, much of this was done in person. So after that was the full board vote. And then along the way, there were several checkpoints to ensure that all the independence requirements were met.
Now, tell us about your role at AT&T. How do you see your leadership there informing your director position at Dow?
I mean, my current role at AT&T is I'm the global controller and the head of the financial planning and analysis for the enterprise, so setting the long-term financial plan. And then my organization also provides the financial CFO decision support for the corporate groups, think legal, finance, and HR. So this role provides and requires significant experience in financial reporting and accounting, including M&A evaluation, risk management. And the role also attends and presents and advises all of the AT&T Audit Committee meetings. So this has given me an understanding of really the focus of an audit committee and how they govern, how their role, again, from a governance and oversight perspective, is different than my role as a member of the management of AT&T. And I've also been really privileged to work with two different audit committee chairs at AT&T and to see how they bring different perspectives to the committee meetings. So I would say my background and experience in financial reporting is viewed as helpful to boards, specifically in audit committees. And then kind of comparing Dow and AT&T and saying what parallelisms do they have? I mean, they're both in different industries, but they have a fair amount of like governance type of activities that a board would look to somebody that had that kind of experience. So they're both focused on sizing the business for the long term and divesting non-core assets. And my role at AT&T certainly is involved in those aspects of the business.
Debbie, finally, how are AT&T and Dow working to address diversity in the boardroom at all levels of their respective organizations?
Both Dow and AT&T have a significant focus on board diversity, as seen by current makeup of each of their boards. Diversity, whether it's race, ethnic, or gender diversity, or other aspects of diversity, industry, geography, experience, bring diversity in thought. And so both companies really see that as an advantage in the boardroom and at their overall workforce. At Dow, of the 5 new directors nominated to their board in the last 2 years, 80% are female or ethnic minority. Overall, the Dow board has 55% gender and ethnic diversity. Dow's board and executive team both rank in the top quartile for U.S. ethnic diversity. And Dow recently joined the Board Diversity Action Alliance, a business-led initiative taking action to increase the representation of racially and ethnically diverse directors on corporate boards. At AT&T, we recently named our first Black chairman of the board, with overall board diversity at close to 40%. And both Dow and AT&T have established goals to increase U.S. ethnic minority representation across the entire U.S. workforce. So as you can see, Judy, we are both focused on how important diversity is, and not just in the boardroom, but in our overall workforce.
Okay, so Debbie, I want to thank you for joining us on NYSE Floor Talk, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Judy, and thank you for having me.